All right, we are live with another episode of Cafe Crash. I'm your host, Daniel Crosier, and I am here with the amazing, the super talented Gerhard Ka'aihue. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you sound a little tuckered out there, buddy.
It is. It's only been 20 years and you still can't get the name right, but that's okay.
Oh, 20 years. Did I fuck it up?
No, it's all right. It's okay. Everybody does anyway. Unless you're in Hawaii.
It's Ka'aihue, isn't it?
Ka'aihue.
Oh, damn it. Yeah, I'm terrible with names. Just ask Christina Badhand.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know how you messed that one up, but no.
Oh, I fucked that one up really good. Yeah. I'm pretty bad. But yeah, beyond that, how are you?
I'm doing great. Life is good right now. Work is, again, just being steadily employed. Working from home, which is the first time I ever worked from home, so I can see why people do enjoy it. And raising a family right now is it's been a top priority. So I'm enjoying life, honestly.
Well,
despite the pandemic, of course. Yes. Right.
Living amongst the pandemic,
right.
The earth is going to hell in a handbasket, but we're doing it.
We're doing okay. We do the best that we can, right?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, with that, good. So, Gerhard, tell us a little bit, where you come from and, how you got into the arts.
Yeah, so originally I'm from upcountry Maui, Hawaii. I'm from a small town called Pukalani. So based on my name, Ka'aihue, I am a native Hawaiian. I really got into the arts because I had a fascination with Japanese animation from an early start. In Hawaii, we would get specific programmings, Sentai or Power Ranger type shows, different type of animation that would be broadcasted to us. Obviously, because we still have a large Japanese and Asian population in Hawaii. So that kind of put me on the path where I'd like to draw. And I wasn't really sports oriented in school. Mm-hmm. I really liked academics to a certain point, but drawing and comic books became a great escape for me. And I remember back in the day, my dad and I would go to the garbage dumps in Hawaii. And at the time you could dump stuff and, scavenge. And there was a whole stack of comic books that somebody threw away. And yes, and that's kind of how I got opened into the world of comics and reading. And I've always been fascinated with that world. So, kind of pursued it. And I tried to figure out, hey, I like to draw, I like to do art. Yeah. But, obviously my parents and my family were dead set against the fine arts. So I found something called commercial art at the time, or graphic design, where we could make money. And my relatives started to kind of follow that path a little bit more. They started to be a little bit more accepting on that and encouraging and nurturing. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty lucky in that point. But every school that I went to, that's kind of where my area of concentration was going towards, was more of a commercial art or graphic design career. And when I studied, I was able to study different areas across the world, fine art and commercial art, mostly in Asia, Japan, and Korea. And then I ended up going to the Savannah College of Art and Design, finishing my degree there, and went straight into graphic design and production art.
Wow, cool. And that's where you met your wife, right?
Yeah. So my wife and I met in college. We met at a different college. We were kind of college hopping, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. I was transferring from a school in Japan. The head of the art department saw my artwork, wanted me to study under him in Enid, Oklahoma, and so I went there. And then my wife is from Sweden. She's a Swedish national, and they had a sister program in Sweden as well. So the school, tiny little school called Phillips University in Enid, Oklahoma, had a sister program in Japan and had a sister program in Sweden. And so we both ended up meeting in Enid, Oklahoma. And then when the art department kind of fell to pieces, misappropriated funds, lost their budget, we went back to our separate areas of origins, kept in touch, and decided we go to SCAD and finish up our degrees there.
Oh, cool. Well, wow, that's quite the thing to try to juggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk
Yes.
about, long distance relationships.
Yeah, we had a long distance relationship going on for a while, but we're both goal oriented people. We wanted to
Mhm.
make sure. I wanted to make sure that I was able to graduate college, and on my own, do things on my own, and she wanted to do the same. And we knew we'd end up being together. And of course, we've been together for like 20 years now. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty cool. So yeah, you're both in the arts, in commercial arts design and everything. Um, what brought you out to Denver?
So interestingly enough, when we graduated college, we had decided whether to stay in Savannah, Georgia. And
Mhm.
my sister at the time, she ended up having, no, she still does. I mean, she has 3 children, and she kind of, I'm just going to say, she kind of laid the guilt trips like, well, it'd be great if you guys could come out,
Oh, help.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
help.
yeah.
And so we ended up, going out to Denver. She's a pilot for Frontier Airlines.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, and so we came out here, and we thought that we were going to either end up in Oregon or California, just because of the job market and the opportunity at the time.
Yeah.
But I ended up finding a job as a creative director for an ad agency, and I started, here, and then again 20 years later, we are still here.
Yeah.
So we both found jobs in our respective um, degrees. So that's lucky for us, because I know not everyone is fortunate enough to work in the degree that they chose, and
Right.
paid off all the debt that they owe to. So we really feel obliged and lucky for that.
That's pretty sweet. The Now you grew up reading comics and everything like that. So was it just a matter of time before you started, going back into your creative illustration and creating some of your own, comic books?
Yeah, well, comics was always a challenge, because there's two loves in my life at the time. Outside of my wife, of course, right? um, but it's always been that storytelling aspect of comics,
Hmm.
and there's also been the storytelling in professional wrestling. So that was another thing that I grew up watching a lot as a
Right.
child, was professional wrestling. You saw, real life superheroes. At the time I was
Yeah.
watching the Road Warriors, were these giant, jacked up, steroid ridden, behemoths just pummeling guys and speaking. And then you had Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and all these creative characters, larger than life characters.
Right.
And it followed almost that kind of comic motif, where you had the struggle, the good and bad, the psychology of one day you're cheering for this guy and the next day you're calling for his blood. I've always been fascinated by that whole
That
type
story arc.
that character development, right?
Yeah.
And you see like a lot of it now, especially in a lot of different genres, where people grew up watching some of the similar things, Japanese animation, professional wrestling, and tapping into that psychology, where you don't really have that storyline anymore of like, this is the main character and that's all we focus on. You see a
Right.
lot of stories and arcs now revolving around all the side characters or the mob characters, and people start to
Yeah.
identify with them a little bit more. So those are the two things that I pursued. And to be honest, once both of us graduated college, that was a big crossroads that we had, because I had enrolled in a professional wrestling school and got accepted.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And if it wasn't for the fact that the gentleman that was running the school in Tampa, Florida, didn't get signed to the WWE, we would probably be having a different conversation right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, this interview would be, I was like, oh, the creative career of wrestling.
Yes. But what happened was, when I moved to Colorado, that was one of the first things I did. Was I reached out to the comic book community, but I also reached out to the local professional wrestling scene here in
Right.
Colorado. So that's kind of where I divvied up my time. And to some extent, I was able to work in comics, but also participate and work with some of the leagues out here in Colorado as well. So I felt pretty lucky, the fact that I could do both at the same time and still maintain a job.
Yeah.
But I mean, quite honestly, I couldn't put my foot into either or. And that's some of the conversations that I've had with a lot of the comic book artists here in Colorado and professional wrestling. It's difficult when you're making good money. You're able to support a family, buy a house, pay
Mhm.
your mortgage and things like that. And then it's different when you're looking at spending hours upon hours on developing a comic book, or going to be a professional wrestler and getting paid like $20 to put your hands into somebody else, your body, your hands, and trust into somebody else. So I took a more peripheral role in that, where I would help with marketing, help with the booking, help behind the scenes. So a lot of things would be behind the scenes, and in some cases I would try to be behind the scenes as well with the art as well. It was never the goal to be a comic book artist. It was never the goal to be a professional wrestler after that point. It was more of basically saying, here's a lot of creatives that we have, as both you and I knows, like, how can we support this project? How can we push this project forward? What can I do from behind the scenes to drive this story or this vehicle forward?
Yeah. How do we execute?
Yep.
Nice. Christina says, aloha.
Aloha, Christina. Mahalo.
So, well, you talk about being supportive and everything, and I definitely know that you do that, specifically with the wrestling world, but when it comes to like comic books and stuff, I know you as the illustrator and a writer in your own right. You've produced your own books, and you continue to produce your own artwork and stuff. So you and I have talked about how to produce other projects, specifically in film and TV and everything like that. In fact, you and I worked on Lucha Libres and Laughs, producing some of those segments with a number of our creative friends, and Nick Gossert, who oversees and runs Lucha Libre itself. So I think you're not just support, you're lead.
Thanks. Yeah, I like working a team effort. It's easy. Sometimes shouldering the burden by yourself, as many creatives know, it becomes difficult, and there's a lot of self-doubt and anxiety, right?
Oh yeah.
So having a team and understanding that, like, this person is counting on me to get my job done, kind of really helps push that effort to get something accomplished. Because I think for a lot of us, we all procrastinate. We always talk about these big, grandiose ideas, and I know you've talked about it at length as well. We're more interested. I mean, everybody has a great idea. Everybody has a fantastic idea. It's hard to find the people that can execute those ideas, and those are the ones that are more successful, because they'll be, whether their story is garbage or Hollywood worthy, they're producing, they're putting stuff out there. Right.
It's I think that's something I've always admired about you is you're constantly doing, whether it's the day job, raising the family, or producing, helping out with the wrestling, helping out in the comic book world, helping out in the film world. In fact, Mr. Wolfie Cruz just chimed in. He said he's ready.
Ready.
He's ready. I think he just put his pants on, so that means he's ready.
I love you, Wolfie. Good seeing you, buddy.
And Colton just chimed in.
Hey.
Crosier and G.
There's my boy, Colton. Young Aiden Quinn, as you say, but yeah.
What's that? Yeah, Aiden Quinn.
Young Aiden Quinn, yeah.
Yeah, the younger Aiden Quinn. Yep. I think if we were to get Stefan and Colton together, we could have Legends of the Fall Part 2.
We could.
Yeah.
We could. I actually have an idea that we're trying to run that would involve all of these guys. So I'll talk to you after this project, because I think the one thing that I love to do, and where I feel like I excel at, not only in my career, in my job, my day to day, is really finding those limitations that we have. Obviously, we can't film, and we can't film in person, and there's a lot of these Zoom things that we're doing. So I love that challenge to figure, like, how can we do something creative with the limitations that we have, but obviously necessities of other inventions. So I think there's ideas that we can do and execute. So yeah, we'd look forward to that.
There's always animation and puppet porn.
I like the.
Speaking of which,
no pants, nice. I mean, honestly, that's the thing, right? This year, it's been nice just to dress from up here and just wear shorts and for the rest of the day. So yeah,
right.
This is the nice thing about working from home.
Right. And he also does his own stunts.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like Colton and Stefan are very supportive. So,
Nice.
let's turn that off. The, yeah, that's one thing during, the pandemic that I've found, interesting is, as you suggested, limitation breeds, innovation. And I think that's one of the reasons why I do this is,
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's definitely an opportunity. It's therapeutic for me, as hopefully it is for whoever I'm interviewing to, to connect. And, that moment of, sanity, hopefully. It's also been a great excuse to, connect and reconnect with my friends like you and, pop in and see how everybody's doing.
No, I mean, one of the things that I've always admired about you, Dan, is just, you're just very industrious and you do things. You always do things. And I always look at you as that parameter because you've done this, you've done things on Facebook, especially with the drawing sessions. It's very inspirational to watch you do things and do things like this. So it's been great. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. You're very kind. I found my sister's kids. They needed an outlet.
Yep.
And the online schooling wasn't the most prevalent maybe, and so that was something to kind of help with that. And I figured other people might enjoy that. So we with that. I know, currently you're working the day job and that's occupying a lot of your time and helping raise the kids. But are you finding, that you're able to, be pretty creative within that job?
Oh, definitely. I think there's a lot of things that I've talked about. There's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of limitations, a lot of hurdles. And, sometimes it's just really about convincing people, what the hell you're doing. Yeah, sometimes when you walk into a situation, the worst thing that people can do is start telling people how to do things, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you walk in on a job or you come in on a team, it's like, well, this is how we do it. This is how we do it. You really need to kind of overlook and kind of see the environment, understand the relationships, how people like to be talked to, or how people like to work with each other. Because I mean, again, we're all different individuals, but sometimes, I may be coming in with the best of intentions, but then someone may be looking at my energy or my the way that I come across as something that's a little domineering or a little insensitive, when we're all just trying to get the job done. And in some cases, especially as you and I know, when there's a budget on the line, fuck your feelings, right? You're getting this stuff done. Either get on board with it or we need to get it done. But in certain cases, when you're working with people, you really have to understand, where they're coming from. And sometimes that can be a limitation because there's trust that needs to be involved. Or, you and I have talked about it too, where I'm more of the type of person, like, as soon as I meet you, I trust you until you tell me otherwise. And it should be the same thing, right? There's things that we can count on for people. And, sometimes, we just fall short, and that's okay. But, this idea that sometimes you have to earn somebody's trust, especially when you come in with a lot of experience and a lot of background in it, it does get tough and tiring. So, a lot of times it is proving people wrong. It is breaking down those misconceptions to say, like, hey, you and I both know what we're doing. We've done this before. And, once, the one thing that I like about my job is it's really results oriented. There's an ROI that I need to provide. How many views do we have? How many people engaged? So we can have our perceptions on things, but the reality of the situations is, sometimes the numbers, the analytics helps us a lot. And it's kind of taken into the career. It's kind of, brushed over into what the creative aspect of it is. It's great that we have ideas, but you and I both know, what's the budget? Can we even hit this? People, tend to forget that, if you're printing a comic book, there's a cost involved. If you're printing print, there's a cost involved. How much money is this? And that's the thing that gets really tough, especially as you're creative. For me, I like my job because I can separate my feelings from my job. When it comes to my art, it's different because I like to do. My art basically reflects something that I'm feeling at the moment, and like most artists are, right? There's an intense emotion, and we're trying to figure out how do I express it. And then how do I put a price on that? You know,
True. How do you budget that?
How do you budget things for that? And for me personally, I found it more successful to just sell prints, just more affordable pieces of my prints rather than creating original artwork. Because the original artwork, sometimes, the value of that piece is worth way more than a price sometimes can be put on it. Of course, somebody offers you a significant price, you're going to take it. But as an unknown, unestablished, unrepresented artist, that can be difficult.
Yeah, most definitely. Speaking of which, if you want to buy any of his prints, go to the Square site website. On the ticker, scrolling at the bottom. Don't go now. Go at the end of the interview, okay? Because you got to stick around for more golden nuggets. Right. By the way, we've got your dead uncle. No, I'm kidding. Some weird reveals throughout.
Okay.
No.
All right. I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, I didn't plan that far ahead. Good old Stefan's also saying he's going to follow you into war.
I appreciate that. Nice.
Better him follow you than me. I'll just lead everybody to their death. But when it comes to illustration, now when I watch you illustrate, especially your print work, it's mostly done digital, correct?
It all starts on paper.
Okay.
Right? So it's like that's where the pieces kind of fall in, is that there's it always starts off with a sketch, and it starts with a lot more sketching, and then it's just tons of paper before it even gets down to the digital part. But then once it gets down to the digital, then there's other tools and tricks that I look at to kind of fill in some of the gaps or some of the pieces that I want. What I try to do with a lot of the pieces is really try to find the symbolism that I'm trying to look for. Does this mean? Yeah, there's a lot of things that it means to me personally.
Right.
And what's interesting, what I like talking to other people when they purchase my art, is they have a totally different interpretation of it. And that's fine, because that's what it should be, right? Art should be emotive. Art should speak to you. There's a popular piece that I do have that I drew after my wife had her first miscarriage. And that was something for me as a way to kind of deal with that particular situation. But when people buy it, they look at it as something totally different, something to rejoice and something to overcome. And that's perfectly fine. That's acceptable. I'm not the type of person that is like, no, this is what this means to, and this is what you have to accept. Again, art is a cheap therapy for me. Art is a way to kind of deal with a lot of complex emotions and just find that outlet for it. And if some people get it, great. And if some people don't, that's fine for me too. Because like I said, if they find solace into buying one of my prints, hanging it up on the walls and looking at it and saying like, hey, like I forget that one kid that would go on the conventions. He drew a lot of Batman. And there's there's an illustration that I have of a girl drawing herself. And, he came up to me a couple of times like, I still have that print, because the print's called Drawing Inspiration from Oneself. He's like, I still have that print. It's hanging on my wall. I was looking at it every day. And I'm like, geez, that's pretty awesome, right? To have.
That's really nice. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty rewarding to have fans or patrons that are so engaged,
right.
That your art means something like that to them. And I think art in general is just a continuous ongoing conversation.
Right. It is. Yeah. And I think part of it is, there's the two schools of thought where, what sells, what's marketable.
Sure.
And then what makes you happy, right? At the end of the day. Right. And it's hard to kind of find that happy medium. And, there's still, it's few and far between you find artists that are like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have that luxury where I'm not looking at my art to basically support my whole, my whole family. So, but I do have my training, I do my education, I do have my artistic background that does. So again, there's that delicate balance there.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's always an interesting, juggling act or conversation within the artist to figure out where commerce and craft meat. The now you've oh, here's Stefan Danfield.
Yeah.
That's probably pretty true. These days, I've been packing on the COVID-19 in pound form.
Sheesh. No, I got COVID-25, but
COVID-25. I think the vaccine for both of us, treadmill.
Treadmill, yeah. Treadmill and working out, definitely. Oy.
Yeah. One day I'll be able to do a push-up again.
Right.
Might be asking too much at this point.
No.
Just, you've produced your own comic books too. Like I think what was it? One was Noir. Is that correct?
Noir, yeah, still Noir. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you share with us a little bit of what that was about, and then how that process manifested?
That was really about just trying to get something done.
Okay.
Let's just do something. And there was a genre that we wanted to explore at the time, and we were talking about it, where again, this boom of really strong female lead characters are coming up. Right. And for me, I guess the impetus was just really investigating relationships and trust. And so the character has a falling out with someone. Basically, the idea, the concept was, here's this very empowered spy, and she ends up finding out her millionaire boyfriend is cheating on her, and ends up gets hired to protect him. And so as far as like how would you trust someone that lost your trust or betrayed your trust, or how would you even protect that person? And some people would be, if the money was right, sure, why not? But in some cases where people, like in the Secret Service, are hired to take a bullet for the president, would they actually take a bullet for the president, or would be like, sorry, I missed it?
Not this one.
So that was kind of where the start of that particular piece came on. And as I started doing the book, I started actually, it ended up evolving into a story where I had a beginning and a middle and an end in mind, but I didn't know the dialogue. And so I would actually write the dialogue and draw it as I was going along. And so the artwork was really, really loose and rough. So if you see the artwork in the book, it's rough, and a lot of it was in some cases I actually did the first issue 16 hours before it was supposed to be released at Denver Comic-Con that year.
Holy shit!
So I actually stayed up stayed up all night just to kind of get it. And there's a few books I've done like that, because again, I think we procrastinate so much, and you get into your head. And having this looming deadline to say, like, well, I need to get this done and printed like tomorrow. So, that kind of forced me to kind of to do it that way. And for the next two or three issues, I did it that way. I actually just waited till the day before I had to produce it and just started writing it. Again, the story arc played out in my head. But then, I decided to take a break from that book and then work on something else. And there's a couple other pieces I did. One I did was a little bit more children oriented, called Momi the Menihune, which is little Hawaiian characters that we have, like gnomes or elves. And that one was a different book, just because a lot of times, especially in Hawaii, and I'm sure a lot of people or natives can relate to this, is how native are you? Like, how Hawaiian are you? Do you speak Hawaiian? You don't look Hawaiian? And it's like, there's always these questions that come up. And then, we're in this age of technology, and how do you embody technology, or how do you embrace technology without denying your past, or denying your heritage, or denying your ancestry? And so that's kind of the pieces that I wanted to address in that book that I created. And I think it's one of those things that I kind of like to explore a little bit more, just identity and growing up in this type of new technological revolution, and how does it apply to ancestry?
Yeah. Wow. I think that's yeah, an amazing topic to really explore. Is this thing? Are you looking at this as potentially being something that's going to be ongoing?
Yes. So the one thing the one thing that I'm really good at work is backing up files and keeping storage. The
Nice.
funny thing was, for some reason, when I did the first issue of Momi, I have no idea where the files went. And this was during a tumultuous time too, where I was moving jobs, applying for different jobs. Luckily, I was able to scan the pages from one of the printed books, and I'm just going to have to redo a lot of the things that I did. But yeah, I've been looking at different ways of publishing the book, looking at self-publishing, and working hopefully with some organizations back home. I get reached out constantly to do illustration work for some of the chapters back home. So we'll see how that works, and maybe this is a story that they can kind of get behind as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Stefan continues to chime in.
Yeah.
We honor your efforts. I think that's the reference to the Dan as our shield.
Nice.
And then Dave was nice enough to tune in and say, thank you for the wedding gifts.
Nice.
So you are most welcome, Dave. You and your wife.
That's an awesome place, yeah.
And I think Stefan really likes, your comic book ideas.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Stefan.
Yeah. So, you're doing that. I know you did a book, I think, with R. Alan Brooks, and then I hired you to illustrate a short story for one of the Show Devils comics too. Collaborating with other artists and writers, what's that like from your perspective?
I think it's difficult because, again, I think like most artists, we all get inside our heads. Is this good enough? Is this going to look awesome? And, it's hard not to compare yourself to other people, right? I think when we did the book with Show Devils, I was partnered with Joe Oliver. And so, it's like, again, I think it was like 6 pages. It's like 6 pages was one story, the other 6 pages, which was entirely doable. But you get that panic and anxiety, especially when you're doing stuff. I get that panic and anxiety, especially when you're doing stuff for other people. And and then when you see Oliver's work, you just can't help. It's like, oh my God, this looks so great. You know what I mean? It's like, what am I even doing in this book? It's just it's easy to get in your head like that.
Right.
With R. Alan Brooks, that was great too, because it was like, hey, I want to do a story. It's like, that's great. So I just did it, and I did it in the style, and then and that's another book where, again, truth be told, a lot of the books that I did was done at my old job, and I ran a pretty decent production department. So I spent a lot of nights there, and it was one of those books where we got printed up, set it out, and then again, I had no idea what I did with the files. So that's something that I'd want to try to change. And that's the thing, is like, I guess that's the part where I have a huge problem with is going back and redoing old work. And it's either, you either take it and then move on, or, you kind of go back and kind of fix some of the edits. And I think that's where we left off with Alan, was there's a lot of edit, not a lot, but there's a lot of input that he had on that particular book. And then I was just kind of like, do I even want to do it at this point? Do I even want to spend the time and effort to not just redo it, but redo the whole book? So that's the struggle. And so, back up your work. Make sure you understand which flash drive you're sharing it to. Multiple backups 3 or 4 times. There's certain books that I have that with, and there's certain books like Momi and Falling Deep was the name of that book, that I was just kind of like, wow, I'm just going to have to redraw everything from scratch again. Hey, you live and learn, right?
Well, to that too, like, don't sell yourself short. What you did for Show Devils was absolutely stellar. So, and I knew you would produce stellar work. Otherwise, I wouldn't have approached you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So, I think to that point too. Like I think we all do that. We're always comparing ourselves to other people, and we always
Sure.
have anxiety. When it comes to anxiety, like how do you manage that personally?
I, you know, crawl out in the bed and just kind of pull the covers over my head, and yeah, it's crippling. There's a lot of times where I've just noticed there's certain things where it's not just the procrastination.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes we just perform better under pressure. If you give
Right.
For me, I know if I give myself too much time on a project, I'm not going to get it done. It's just I get too distracted by other things.
Mm.
And when we're in the moment of doing something, as I mentioned, I find it much more easier to be on task and more oriented towards that. I mean,
Yeah.
again, there's a lot of different factors that come up, right? I mean, obviously, when someone hands you money and says like, "Hey, do this," then you're obviously like, "Okay, I gotta do this."
Right.
In some cases, and again, if people say like, "Hey, can you do this for me?" and it's to the point where it's like, "Yeah," and then we'll pay after the fact. Well, that gives me more initiative to not to do the project until the last minute, right? So,
Right.
and I know a lot of us tend to operate that way, but
Right.
there's a lot of there's a lot of self-doubt that kind of goes through, and it's just a mind game that I have to constantly play with myself to say like, look, just get it done. And there's a lot of things that I look at now. There's certain things that you just like, oh my God, did I do that? Oh God, I could do this a lot better. What is this? What is this thing I'm looking at now? And I
Yeah.
do that to myself a lot, and I know a lot of artists do that as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to just put your big boy pants and just say like, shut the fuck up and just do it. But it takes a lot of time. And I think, again, going back to working in a team environment, I think that's where I strive a little bit more, because it's easy to let yourself down. It's
Yeah.
very easy to let yourself down. I mean, we let ourselves down daily, on a daily basis. It's hard to let other people down, and it's hard to face other people when you let them down. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is a tough thing to reconcile and to cope with, and then to move on. Um, the when it comes to like working with frequent collaborators, like I know you work with a longtime friend like Q, who I think you grew up with, right?
yep, we were born. I mean, yeah, born and raised same island. His backyard and my backyard, connected, and yeah, we went to grade school together, then middle school. Yeah, so I've known him for the majority of my life. So, yeah.
Nice. And you guys do film and production projects together.
That's different. I think in the commercial aspect, yes, I've used him a lot in the commercial aspect, and
Mm.
there's a different hierarchy that's set up, right? Again, when it comes to money, when it comes to like, hey, who's directing, there's that. But imagine doing something with your brother for fun.
Right. I understand that.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing something with a relative. So on the creative side, it gets a little different. And I don't know if you can notice that dynamic, because I know, the three of us have worked together.
Yeah.
Again, there's that hierarchy where it's like, you're the director, Dan's the director, let's do that. And sometimes it's hard when it's just the two of us, because we'll constantly be at odds with each other to basically say, well, this is how we should do it, and this is how we should do it.
Right. It's the brother dynamic.
It's the brother dynamic. Yep.
Yeah. Constant push and pull.
Push and pull.
Yeah. Well, at least you guys are able to work in that capacity where you've got the commercial aspect, and then you've got the creative aspect too. Two separate fields to do projects in. But you've produced like I think some military projects, right? Is that
so? We worked with So I worked with him on his projects, and again, that's been easier to do, because again, whether it's collaborative, there always have to be that hierarchical structure, right?
Mhm.
Who's leading the project, who's developing the project. I think once those parameters are established, then it's a lot easier to work through things. And sometimes when we start to do collaborations, it can get difficult. But
Yeah.
but yes, I think on some of the projects that we worked on, it's been easier to kind of decide like who's in charge of what.
Yeah.
I think on the creative side of things, I do refer to him a lot more. And then when it comes to more the commercial side of things, that's where I run the project.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. Um, when it comes to something like, I've had you and Q and Stefan who's watching, and a few other of our co-conspirators like Elise and Amanda and amazing cast. Work on like Camp Crash and produce some of those episodes, and then but more recently and a lot more consistently, working on like the Lucha Libre segments with Scott and Dave shows up every now and then, which you oversee and you run. What's that experience been like for you?
Again, this that experience has been great. Because as you know, pro wrestling, again, a passion project. I love seeing just the new talent. It's not just professional wrestling. It's something else that I never thought I'd get into, which was stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
So we get to see a lot of these young up and coming comedians, as well as these young up and coming wrestlers, or well-established wrestlers, who haven't really made it to the WWE or the big organizations. Quick side note. I mean, there's Abaddon, who's from Colorado, and she's the girl that comes out and vomits blood before she wrestles. I mean, she's signed with AEW now, as one should, right?
Yeah, you get the nerves. It's just like it's the neighborly thing to do.
It's a neighborly thing. Now she has to wear a mask up now, but yeah, I mean, she's on TNT television now, and she's wrestling in the second largest organization in the United States. So cool. It's things like that, but at the same time, we're all volunteering our time and efforts. No one's getting paid. These are all passion projects, and I'm very respectful of that. Again, I'm a totally different person when it comes to a paid project, because there's budgets that we have to adhere to. People are getting paid, so we can be a little bit more direct on certain things. But when it's a passion project, as you and I both know, people are giving up our time. We have to be a little bit more accommodating. We're just grateful to have people, donate their time, their equipment, their effort, and do something that they believe is a great project to have, or something that we can use, down the road. The discussions that we've had with other organizations or other companies, reaching out to them, getting feedback from them. There's a lot of things that we do behind the scenes that people just don't realize. But having a set of team that's there, we buy them food, feed them, get them drinks. Yeah, that's the least that we could do. But I think we all believe in that effort. That like an indie band, one day we'll hit that major label, and then we'll start running. And at least we have that crew now, right? We know which crew we want to go to. And I know Colton, who's also watching, and he's been there to help out as well.
That's right.
On those Lucha Libre and Laugh shoots. So again, it's great to just have that connection. And again, we realize that we shouldn't be asking for people, pay people. Yes, we want to pay people, but without a budget, sometimes we donate our time to other people's project. They donate our time, and it's a nice little synergy that we have, because we're not all millionaires, but we're all trying to work to that goal to do something that we'd love to do, which is tell stories or create content.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes payment also comes in beer and pizza.
Right, beer and pizza. Yeah.
The when you think about wrestling and comics, as you mentioned, they're basically like living, breathing superheroes in the real world. And they have their story arcs and stuff, just as you would see in the comic book world. The fandom that goes into too, is there like any difference, any distinguishable difference?
I would think anything that, again, fan, right? A fan is basically an abbreviation for fanatic, right? Someone that's fanatic about something.
Sure.
And, obviously it crosses both lines. I mean, talk about Star Wars. People will have a very passionate opinion about Star Wars. Apple versus PC back in the day. Comics and pro wrestling, do skirt that line where people are very fanatical about it. They have their certain ideas, and it creates this nostalgia and memory.
Right.
You look at a lot of the Marvel movies that are coming out, it's built on some of the nostalgia that we grew up with, right? With Civil
Right.
War, the eternal story of like, how many times can Peter Parker screw up and have Uncle Ben die? Every single iteration of Spider-Man's there. But again, that's the integral part of that story, right? With great power comes great responsibility. This is what
That's the motivator.
That's the motivator, right? And so
Right.
we have these instances where, you know, where was the first time I was when I watched, you know, the episode 4 of Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
you know, watched that with my dad, and, you know, there's all this nostalgia that builds up. And it's the same with comics, you know. Some people, some people found comics on their own, and some people resonated with certain characters, like Wolverine or the X-Men, you know, the Hulk. And it's the same thing. People resonate with certain characters in professional wrestling because they identify either, you know, with them, or they admire something about them. And you know, and it's geekdom, it's fandom all the way through. So
Yeah.
you know, whether you like NASCAR or whether you like sports or comic books, it's kind of the same when we kind of look into that lens of perspective. Is it something that gives me reprise for my day-to-day life, right? As a working man, I just want to sit down and relax and watch sports because it's something that either, you know, relaxes me, or it's something that I did or was aspired to do in high school, but I never could, and so now I'm watching it. You know, same things with bands playing. You know, it's easy to sit there and criticize things, right? It's harder to create that content, and I think that's the difference that I find, where people get overly critical because they were like, "Well, if I would have done it, I would have done it this way," right? And you find that in sports, everything.
Yeah.
But the question is, okay, then do it yourself. And I think that's where we all came in and say, like, well, you know, I don't like what I see, so
I'm going to participate.
I'm going to participate or do my own piece. And Lucha Libre Laugh is a great example of it, where it's like, well, it's not really professional wrestling. It's not really, you know, a comedy show per se. It's kind of skirting its own different lines of what it could be. And I think that's what attracted, you know, both of us to that particular programming, or just the things that we do.
Yeah, you know, seeing you at like you know, back in the day when we could gather in groups, you know, seeing you at like conventions and comic book shows and stuff, you're always, you know, you always got an amazing setup and engaging with the crowd and sketching and stuff, and then, you know, seeing you manage a production crew, you know, live at the Oriental Theater, or watching you get up on stage and do the announcements and stuff. You always have like a big presence, but are always, you know, quite approachable and accessible, which is always something I, you know, really appreciate, because you're always willing to jump in and engage, no matter what the setting is. So I always, you know, kind of wonder, it's like, you know, what's, you know, is there much of a difference in the audience that you receive? And you know, for me personally, like you know, now that we're on our end, we're doing like a horror convention, which still has yet to see the light of day, right?
There's a lot of conventions.
And then you know, coming from the comic book world, the audiences, even though, you know, they commingle quite a bit. I always find, you know, the comic book audience at a large convention can be hot or cold. And then, you know, but the horror crowd at, say, like Mile High Horror Film Fest or something, they come in much smaller numbers, but are always hot. So you know, that I always, you know, appreciate, and I kind of get the same feeling with a wrestling audience. They're almost always hot, but then at those live shows, there's usually a lot of alcohol.
There's a lot of alcohol involved. But I think I see what you're trying to get at as far as the question is concerned. I think the biggest difference, though, is that when you go to the comic conventions, you know, there's a diversity in what people are looking for, right? You have people that are looking to either acquire something from somebody they know, right, like a famous artist, an autograph, a sketch. Or, you know, they're looking to find things that they've invested into, right? Like, if I get this, you know, can I resell this? How much is this thing going to be worth, or value? And then you have the people that are straight up there to collect. So your attention span is all over the place, right? If you were somebody like in the big comic book industry, then sure, you can come over there. You don't even have to have a big setup. You can just sit down there like, I'm blah blah blah, I worked on this book, and people will come to you because they know who you are.
Right.
Where like, yes, like other artists like myself, and again, we're not big names by any stretch of the imagination, and so yeah, we'll have examples of the work, and that's what will bring people in to kind of get through. Whereas professional wrestling, they're there to be entertained. You know what I mean? Everybody's there to kind of watch a show and to be part of that show and to be part of that performance. It is exhilarating to say the least. Where at the comic conventions, it becomes a lot more intimate. Where you ran into that where people, they like your artwork, but they're petrified to talk to you because a lot of us are not socially skilled in some instances, right? And it takes a while for them to start the conversation. And you've been there before. You try to nurture somebody to kind of help them speak, and once you find that commonality, then sometimes it's like you're speaking the same language, and they feel a lot more comfortable and they feel a lot more ease. And then when they invest in your work, they're investing because you establish a relationship, right? Rather than establishing, like, hey, buy my stuff. And that's what I love about conventions is that, we got to meet each other, right? We got to meet people. We got to establish relationships. We get to network. And that's what I look forward about conventions more than anything else. It's not, yes, it's great to sell and make a lot of money, sure. But at the same time, it's always interesting to hear other people's experiences or just kind of, find that relationship. Because my artwork does either reflect something that's Asian influence, Japanese influence, or professional wrestling. And I hit those crowds time and time again. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Colton just chimed in. Said, just getting to hang out with AG and Crosier is enough payment for me.
I love having Colton help us out as much as possible. But yeah, no, just hanging out. It's great. I mean, there's great stories. I mean, there's certain things. Luckily, I think between the three of us, we haven't had anything nefarious happen as of yet that I'm trying to think of. But yeah, it's always good when there's not a story that ended up, with one of us going to jail or or having the police called on us. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had that experience yet, but I'm open to new.
There was close a couple of times, right?
That's true. That's true. And to that extent too, we talk about like young artists, starting out and everything, and trying to find their voice. At a convention where you see a lot of artists, set up at their tables, they're not necessarily selling, but they might not also be engaging with people too.
Sure.
You're like, what kind of insight or guidance could you suggest?
Yeah, it's funny because there's the other thing that I did when I first moved to Colorado too was teach at a college level, so graphic design courses here in Colorado. And a lot of my students ended up becoming involved in the conventions as well. And it's great to just, kind of walk to them. But sometimes it's, we've always had this debate. And I just remember in one situation, one of my former students, he was at a convention. He was not having a good time because his whole purpose was to sell. Nothing was selling. And, I said, hey, I don't really do a lot of fan art anymore. I'll do it upon request, but the things that I sell is not fan art oriented. And I just happened to see that he had, a fan art piece that was kind of behind the desk a little bit. And I just said, look, here, take this Wolverine, put it up front, and then see what happens. And of course, people started to stop and look at it because it was something that they were able to identify. Right. Again, we can have a whole different conversation about fan art. That's something totally different. But again,
we'll wait to have that with Kevin Gentilcore.
Yes. But at the same time, it's something that somebody's familiar with. And, as soon as we did that, somebody stopped and said like, hey, that's a cool Wolverine. And that's when things started to happen. I think, and this is not just young artists, but it's also with young designers and commercial artists as well, is that a lot of them come out of school thinking that they know everything, right? That they have an idea. There was a situation where a friend of mine at an agency downtown in Denver, they operated across from the Art Institute of Colorado. And this one kid came out of college and he was like, hey, here's my resume. I'm looking for $100,000 a year. and thinking like $100,000 right out of college, right? What do you know? And there's certain instances where kids would come out of college and have a hard time because they had a hard time listening. And that's the thing about commercial arts that's different, is like there's a client now and you have to please the client. And again, there's that trust that I talked about earlier. Unless you've won multiple awards and brought in other agencies millions of dollars, they're not going to listen to you.
Right.
They're going to come at you with like, this is a picture that my 5-year-old son did, make this into a logo. And it's hard for a lot of young designers to come into the industry and being told no. And I run into that all the time, where I literally had to school somebody again to say, this is what people are looking at. They're looking at how much this things cost. Who gives a crap about all this other artistic, bullshit? I want to know how much this costs and, what's in it for me. And that's kind of the same thing that you kind of look at if you're trying to sell on the comics in the convention market, right? What is going to appeal to the person? We all have personal art, like myself. I love to do my personal art, but I'm not there pushing it in people's faces. I'm letting people come to me and ask about it. And so at the same time, there's that balance that you have to strike up to say, am I trying to sell to people? If it is, how do I get them to approach me rather than, the other way around?
Right. Oh, that's pretty insightful then.
Not to say just do a bunch of fan art, right? but sometimes that's what people do. I mean, they do a ton of fan art, but
that certainly is one way to start the conversation. I see a lot of artists that are just also introverts too, and just cannot bridge that gap to make that basic human contact sometimes. So it's always interesting to see how people address that issue. I think you and I are natural gabbers.
Sometimes, I mean, there's sometimes, like you said, I get into my head, and you mentioned Q, and that's where Q has been really great at conventions, where it's like, again, if I'm doing a commission or if I'm working on something, I can just sit there and concentrate on a commission, and he can just gab all he wants to everybody. Yeah. And so he's a great gift for that, and so utilize, and so that could be another thing. And if you have a friend that's a lot more outgoing, then you bring them. Bring somebody to incite that conversation. So.
Yeah, Stan Yan has Stacy as kind of the barker.
Ooh, great, I know.
She is very effective.
She's worth every penny that he pays her.
yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
So no, that's I think those are all incredibly good good insights, and also coming from an educator background that you have. That's always interesting to think about too. Would you say too that, and let me know if I'm putting words in your mouth, along with the design background, if for instance, if maybe you don't get that corporate job, maybe you have to freelance and to make ends meet and stuff. Having that business background to manage that might not be a bad idea either.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we do struggle with, especially in this country, is really teaching our students about finances, about like what credit card debt looks like. What is a 24% APR interest rate going to do to my credit,
right?
Things like that, and then really running a business. One of the best things that I came across was an instructor that told me, it would be beneficial for you to learn how to use Excel. And here's the reason why. And it was just like, okay, boom, lights opened up, and it makes a lot of sense. And to me, for me, if school was taught in this area of dollars and cents rather than hypotheticals, it would be a little bit more, I think would be more useful for somebody like me. And then when I teach classes now, that's what I try to teach is the hypotheticals. Not the hypotheticals, but the monetary side of things. It's like, what is the average rate an hour for a graphic designer? And then you look at what you pay for your computers, what you pay for your internet. Is $15 an hour even enough? And this is where you kind of come back to where even with the artists, right? Art takes a lot of time. Comic books, drawing a comic book takes forever.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I've kind of shied away from it, because it's difficult, right, to devote yourself to draw all these pages and all these panels,
right,
without without really devoting yourself to that craft. I'm fine with being a master, jack of all trades, master of none. I love getting involved in a lot and learning a lot of different things. And again, it doesn't mean I'm going to master anything, but at least I've got that little, buffet mentality where I've sampled everything in life.
right.
But when you have those people that are super hyper focused into a skill and craft, it pays off for them, right? You see, you see the fruits of their particular labor. And I think that's where a lot of people need to decide, are you okay with just being mediocre at everything? And I'm okay with that. Or do you want to, really excel in this career of, becoming a comic book artist or becoming an illustrator, devote yourself? Then that takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And learning about business and learning how to sustain yourself, I think is a key thing that, as you mentioned, a lot of young artists tend to ignore.
Right. Looks like Colton just chimed in to that effect. And I think, Colton, if you're still in school right now, we would implore you to seek some accounting courses or business courses, and maybe even, law, a little bit of copyright, law wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. I mean, especially with content creation right now. I mean, YouTube is a big thing, right? YouTuber is now, entered our vernacular. People can create a career off of being a YouTuber and understanding the laws, the copyright policies of those things, especially if you're doing videos for kids, is one of those things where, we used to have this whole thing where, you do it until somebody busts you. But, nowadays with lawsuits and, licensing and things like that, you definitely need to be on top of it.
Yeah, most definitely.
Especially when someone steals your work, right? I think we all know the artists that had their work stolen, and then everybody's trying to figure out, like, what's the laws? What can I do? Right. Be prepared ahead of time.
Yeah, most definitely. No, that's really good advice. Gerhard, thanks so much for coming on the show and
thanks for having me
with me. Go ahead, stick around for a few minutes, and for everybody, make sure you go to Square Site, which is, streaming along on the ticker at the bottom there. Purchase some of Gerhard's prints. God damn it. Do it, man. Put it on your wall.
Hard sell. No.
Yeah. But for everybody who is able to tune in tonight, thank you for spending your evening with us and waxing art. And, have a good evening. Take care of each other. Look out for each other. We love you. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.